next one is more like along the infrastructure kind of boring lines, is a focus on something more practical. So again, we're going for something super interesting and like inspiring, something a little bit more practical. And that's continuing to focus on influencer marketing. So basically, you know this, it's like if we're all banned on social media and we can't advertise, you have to find proxies who have the platform that can give you that reach. And we saw like a whole bunch of people using this tactic. I mean, I was just like looking at LinkedIn and I saw Lily Allen talking about wow tech, and I was like, pause. Like this is like what? But I don't know. What's your take on this? I don't know whether it's positive or negative. I just kind of feel kind of like, we'll see. But I think it's going to definitely happen.
Yeah, it's already happening, and it's funny that you say you don't know if it's positive or negative, because I actually wrote a piece about this kind of surge of like celebrity figures and their new eau de parfum, which is their new sex toy, right? Like it's just so interesting that there's the new face of sex toys are typically, I think the ones that we've seen is was it Dakota Johnson for Maud, Lily Allen for Womanizer
for a while, I think,
and Cara Delevingne for Laura DiCarlo. So those are the three that I've seen. It'll be interesting to see how that progresses and how that develops, because I mean they're all cis white women, and that's kind of like, again, the same narrative that we were just talking about, like that's applying to like one type of population that is a pain point for a lot of people, a lot of young women who are like, struggling with their sexuality. And I'm intrigued to see how this kind of influencer marketing is going to apply to different populations. And is it just a marketing ploy? But I mean, it obviously is, right? It obviously is.
Yeah, entirely.
Well, is that really even a question? But almost like there are pros and cons. It's a marketing ploy. It's potentially kind of limiting and still very kind of like white and cis. And I know that there's also the flip side where it's like, okay, but maybe we're normalizing the conversation around sex. Maybe this is going to benefit us, and maybe this is going to change people's opinions around sex positivity, because I know that their platforms are huge. Like,
exactly,
they're so big that it's into the minds of young individuals who are starting to talk about sex more. Like, just the fact that one of the main reasons this industry, I think, exists at the moment is the fact that it's still so taboo, and like we've been brought up in such a sex negative world, and that's had such a detrimental impact on our psyches and on our pleasure and like on so many things, and there's so many layers to it. And I think having these figures could benefit. It could benefit. I think it is kind of like it's an interesting way to go about it. I'm not advocating for it as such. I'm just saying, like, this it's one way that could stimulate debate and discussion and actually drive the conversation forward. Do you have any thoughts on it? Like,
I'm not in love with I'm not in love with it. I think that it's positive on a micro level. So I think using local influencers is interesting. So like using someone who is spearheading the conversation around non-binary sexuality and health, who has 90,000 followers. Yeah, that sounds good to me, because then you're really focusing on a population that maybe is underserved. The mainstreaming of it in a way that's almost, for better or worse, whitewashing the industry. I don't know how I feel about it. But I'm choosing to just say that the jury's out. I think it offers potential. It's the way that a lot of us are getting contact, getting contact to our end users, right? Because we can't advertise readily in the same way that other people advertise.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big opportunity there. And for me, the opportunity is talking to people through a trusted source, who maybe aren't spoken to. So full disclosure, we use influencer marketing at Modality for surveys. So when we think about, okay, if we're doing a survey on trans people, I'm not going to just like blast out this super generic, ad or a super generic kind of post, because who are you? I don't trust you, but we're trying to build something or like get information that is going to build a product that might help a population, but we want to talk to them in their language with people who they trust in a way that's healthy. And we want the influencers to give us feedback to say, okay, hey, that's not kosher. Like, this is not how you say this. Right now you've overstepped. So building a relationship with influencers to actually target a population, but also involve them in the conversation and the co-creation of our surveys, I find that really interesting, and it kind of covers my blind spots so that we're getting information and data that's going to be useful to society. Now, when I think about just putting, Gwyneth Paltrow just came out with that sex toy, right? And like just shat on the entire adult space. It's like, net good for society? Question mark. I don't know.
What was it? She said something about like, we're making elegant toys, and it's just like,
as opposed to like,
it's very much kind of just like, like you said, shitting on the rest of the industry. And what frustrates me so much about that specific example is there's so much responsibility in this industry. You have so much responsibility to educate people. And I remember watching the Netflix show, the Goop one, with on the sex positive episode, and Gwyneth didn't even know the difference between a vagina and a vulva. And I'm not shaming anyone who's watching this who doesn't know, but it's really frustrating when you have so much reach and so much power. And I know that show was educating people, and it just was like, you're literally, you own this platform and you don't know what you're talking about. And I think everyone who is in this industry does go through a period of education. We all go through a period of education while we're working. I'm learning new stuff all the time, but you have an air of responsibility to be able to like hold your community safely and make sure that they're getting the right information.
Yeah, that's the risk you run, though. It's like let's say you have one of these influencers, and then they're not that mindful, they're not that thoughtful about the space, and then they go off and do something else, and then it shuts our industry down because of the ripple effect. It's like we're putting all of our eggs into a basket that might just unravel the good vibes that we're putting out there in the world. Right. So yeah, I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how this is going, and I do see that there are positives on a local scale, and I think that companies can really benefit from that. I'm yet to be won over with the kind of big scale celebs taking over the industry. It just doesn't sit fully right.
It doesn't sit. That's yep. But on to a more like the most positive. So this is my favorite one, actually, and the one I was most reticent to actually embrace, the kind of shift towards more diverse sex products for men. And so a woman who put me onto this, whose name is for some reason escaping me right now. I'll put it somewhere in a show note whenever we put this out. Well, she was talking to me about how her entire sex shop is created with men's sexuality in mind, thinking about kind of removing, I guess, toxicity and like really kind of giving more options. And I was like, huh, like I don't love that as an idea in terms of like you know, they get everything. Why can't we have something? You know, but then I was like, okay, one, there are different kinds of men. Two, you know, getting rid of toxicity is a good thing, and giving people more access to different ways of exploring their sexuality is really interesting. So when I think about it from a post Me Too, like building positive masculinity, I get really excited about the potential of, you know, some of these new products.
Yeah, totally. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, there's so many different types of men, right? Like this is, you know, we're not just talking about cis men, we're talking about non-binary, we're talking about trans men. Like the idea that products that can be created that are driving the narrative, like you said, driving the narrative forward to create a less toxic less toxic masculinity, right? It's more of a healthy, positive masculinity that allows men and individuals to be more vulnerable when it comes to sex, right? I think there's this conversation that needs to happen, that there's so much of this kind of toxicity that is like just really doesn't allow space for exploration and sensuality. And I know that there are new brands and new products that, you know, are coming out to kind of really tackle pain points for specifically for people with erectile dysfunction, and so that is something that I know can be just a difficult arena to tackle, because it's like Viagra has kind of taken over that space, and
Yeah.
hasn't really allowed like sex tech for at least for people with penises is like super, it's super shrouded in shame. And I know that even people in my peers who've talked about owning fleshlights are so private about it, and I know that we're kind of only just kind of getting proud to own a vibrator and talk about, you know, vulva pleasure and stuff like that, but like there's so much shame around owning a fleshlight and talking about kind of like, yeah, masturbation. And it just, I think there definitely needs to be a shift. I totally agree with your kind of like hesitation. You're like, but they get so much, and like, you know, the mainstream adult industry is catered towards men and porn and sex robots as well. And I think, yeah, like I said earlier, there's places for those types of sex tech, but what about the future of like creating a really positive space that, yeah, promotes this kind of healthy masculinity, and incorporates, yeah, kind of like, I know there's, so the platform I'm thinking of is Mojo, and they
I just
are,
saw them. Yeah.
yeah, they're kind of taking the lead in this, I think, in this space for erectile dysfunction, and really doing kind of similar things to, I guess, what like kind of Furley and Dipsy were doing, with like just having people to be more mindful about their sexuality and be more like using erotic or like audio guides and using different methods, and actually getting so many experts in this field to just like bring the conversation to the forefront and actually talk about these issues that no one talks about, or if they do talk about them, and it's usually in quite a shaming way
or a jokey way, something that makes it just like light of this, a really, I think that's bothering people,
yeah.
you know.
And it actually is, specifically this thing is like, I think like 30% of 30-year-olds suffer from ED, and then it goes up to 40% when they're 40, 50% when you're 50. Like that is the number, was like the numbers we're talking about. And I know platforms like Beducate, for example, that I work with as one of my clients, like just having video content that actually just sits you down and educates you on your body, and how to use how to like understand your pleasure, and how to please a partner, and just like the fact that yeah, these kinds of men's products are just like, I think there's definitely this kind of flow between what we're seeing in terms of like moving the conversation forward and being more empowering and less shameful around sex, and just allowing men to have that space and just allowing them to actually hold a space, not to take over the space. That's not what I think is happening. It's just to allow to have that space, because we're all striving for the same thing. We're all striving for like this kind of sex positive, pleasure positive world where we're allowed to be vulnerable and learn about so many things about our bodies and our pleasures.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great place to end.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you so much for going through the trends with me. This has really been a pleasure.
It's been great. I've loved chatting to you. Like before this, I was like, oh, I don't have anything to say.
Oh yeah, but you have all the things to say. Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, cheers.